Hello and welcome to another webinar brought to you by the Secretariat of Child and Youth Protection at the USCCB. My name is Melanie Takkanen and I'm the Associate Director for the Secretariat. Now before we get into the webinar today, let's go ahead and start with a prayer. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, amen. And this is a prayer for healing victims of abuse. Holy Spirit, comforter of hearts, heal your people's wounds and transform brokenness into wholeness. Grant us the courage and wisdom, humility and grace to act with justice. Breathe wisdom into our prayers and labors. Grant that all harmed by abuse may find peace in justice. We ask this through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you for tuning in for today's webinar. Today we're going to talk about the topic of a peer review process and what that looked like for a diocese that did it and recommendations that they have for any of you that might be considering this in your own diocese. But a couple of logistics before we get to that part. This webinar is being recorded, so if you want to share this with someone else in your diocese or you'd like to take a look back at something that you want to further dive into, we'll send out the link once the recording is live and available on our website. There'll also be an opportunity to ask questions as we get to the end of the webinar. So please type in any questions that you may have at any time into the chat box that's below that video screen there, and we'll get to those at the end. We've also made a couple of documents available for the webinar right below the video screen. There'll be a couple of different links. One of them is to the PowerPoint that we're going to get to in a little bit, and also some of the supporting documentation that we'll be discussing throughout the webinar as well. Now I'd like to introduce our presenters that we have here with us today to share a little bit more about what exactly a peer review process for a diocese is. So first we have with us Elder Samaniego, and he's the newly appointed Director for the Office of Child and Youth Protection in the Diocese of San Bernardino in California. Now, he was the Associate Director of that office for the past 10 years. Elder is also the Program Coordinator for the diocesan ministry called Restoring Me, which offers 12 one-day faith-based healing retreats for adult survivors of abuse. His 22 years of experience in a variety of diocesan, parish, and school ministries, both in the U.S. and in Mexico, have given him the understanding on the challenges we all face regarding the implementation of safe environment policies and procedures at all levels. Elder has a bachelor's degree in psychology and is certified in suicide prevention. He's been happily married for 19 years and is also blessed with 5 children, 4 sons and a daughter. So this is a little bit of a break coming in today for this webinar from all the craziness going on at home.
Especially in the first week of school.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you for coming to share a little bit more with us today.
Thanks for having me.
We also have with us Eileen Puglisi, and Eileen is a current member of the National Review Board. And prior to serving on the board, Eileen held the position of Director for the Office of Children and Young People, in the Diocese of Rockville Center from 2003 to 2014. Her prior work history involves director-level work at various psychiatric centers in New York, including Deputy Director of the Queens Children's Psychiatric Center. Eileen received a professional degree in school psychology from St. John's University in New York and an MS degree in guidance and counseling from Hunter College in New York. She has direct experience as a psychologist and is an avid golfer. So welcome, Eileen.
Thank you.
Now, just a little bit of a background on what exactly a peer review process is before we start getting into some of the specifics. This is something that the Diocese of San Bernardino, under the direction of Bishop Barnes, put into place last November of 2018, to really look at what's going on within the Safe Environment Office and have some folks from the outside come in and kind of take a deep dive. So it was separate from the annual audit that happens every single year, where every diocese is audited and provides information to Stonebridge business partners currently. This one was more kind of looking at the internal practices that the diocese goes through as well. And Eileen and I actually were able to go out and participate in that as well, so that's why we're all here with you today to share a little bit more about that. So with that, I will turn it over to Elder to start sharing a little bit more about what this peer review process is.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. Well, the process began probably about 15 years ago, per Bishop Barnes' request to have an insight on each diocesan office. Specifically, most based on him wanting to know where it's going, where the ministry is at, and where it's going, because demographics change, population in certain dioceses will change. the cultural diversity will probably decrease or increase. So he wanted to take a look at where we're at because we were growing not only as a diocese and its parishes, but also as a diocesan or chancellery. Staff offices in the staff office personnel were growing. So he wanted to take a look at where we're at as a ministry. Every office in the pastoral center in the Diocese of San Bernardino has gone through this ministry peer review that provides the bishop just a more specific and thorough look at where the ministry is at. If we look at a PowerPoint, the first thing it says, well, the question is, why did the diocese decide to have a ministry peer review? Now, we're missing an either, I just noticed that. It's per the bishop's request. So this comes from the bishop. It comes from the bishops. It's a question that the bishop will ask himself. You know, how is this office doing and where is this office going, right? So the first item is to review and evaluate an office and its ministry in light of the diocesan vision and core values. Now the bishop wants to make sure that the office is connected with the diocesan vision and its core values. Make sure it's on track on that. And then the second part of this item is that the ministry's mission statement is also being applied, right? All offices we have our own mission and vision statements. Mm-hmm. Wants to make sure that we're on track in regards to diocesan vision, core values, and the office's own mission statement. Now, this is an office ministry peer review process. It's not a ministry personnel process. So it's not an individual, you can say review or audit of performance. This is an office review, performance review, in other words.
So it's not the HR police coming in.
It's not the
see what was going on there.
Our HR police. People get nervous. We get nervous. You have the bishop, right, asking for a peer review on your ministry and your office. There is a whole lot of stuff that has to be gathered, documentation, interviews to be made, planning, a lot of planning. So, but it is not an HR spearheaded review. This is by the bishop's office.
Several years ago, there was a movement to completely abandon the individual evaluation. Actually, there was a movement to kind of blow up the traditional HR and to be replaced by peer review. Now, I think there's room for both, for the individual evaluation as well as a very substantial peer review.
Mm-hmm. Of course. And this pertains to the office review, insight on the office procedures, on the tasks, on meeting deadlines and goals, and also identifying, as the second item says on the PowerPoint, ministry challenges and strengths, because we want to identify, we want a third party person or team to shine the spotlight on us and say, this is what's working for you, and this is what has not been working for you, and how can you make it better, right? So second item, it's actually identifying strengths and challenges. And the third item on the PowerPoint, it's to review the office relationships within, as a team, as a staff, and its collaboration with other offices, parishes, vicariates, and other diocesan entities. So this is another item that helped us, see ourselves through a peer review team's eyes in that sense. The next item is to identify the level of service the office provides to the parishes and vicariates. Now this is important because this is at the service level. Mm-hmm. It teaches us if we're doing it the right way, and if we're being just professional and non-pastoral, or if we're being pastoral but non-professional, which we can go either way sometimes.
You want to have that balance.
We want to have that balance, of course, and also to all ethnic communities, to departments, and to diocesan ministries. This is on the service. It's an evaluation of our service to others, not only in-person services and hospitality, but also phone calls and emails. Are we responding to emails quickly? Sometimes those we get a call complaining. I called this office, didn't get an email until 3 days later, or no one is answering my calls. So this is part of it, right? Our service to others. And item number 5, to offer and suggest recommendations for improvement, this is pretty much, the focus of this peer review audit is to get recommendations on what can improve in what we're doing, and also growth and development. And this all results into an action plan, right? What we get out of this is an action plan to go forward, to continue going forward in our ministry. What the ministry peer review definition is, in light of this process, this diocesan process, per the bishop's wishes, it's for this specific process, ministry peer review refers to an evaluation of the pastoral and professional work of a ministry or office conducted by a selected team of members, consultants, that have competent experience in the field related to the office ministry, right? So it is recommended that this team represent experience in the field, in this case, safe environment. In our office, it was a safe environment. We have someone from the review board, someone from the secretariat, national secretariat. We had local, state, and national level members of this team, right? Which was great. It was awesome. Bishop Barnes was impressed, and so were we. So thank you.
So the overall kind of idea behind it, or the structure anyway, it's pretty similar to a school accreditation process,
yes,
right? For those that may be familiar with that,
yes.
which happens in their dioceses and all, the Catholic schools go through that, where you have
exactly.
other people from the field, and they all kind of use their own experiences and expertise to say, okay, here's what we see based on our own experiences of accreditation.
Exactly. It's pretty much the same process. How it's implemented, it's a pretty long process. This is not, you get the notice from the bishop one day and you have to be ready in a month. No, it actually takes about a year for the office to get ready, right? Mm-hmm. Our situation was kind of, it was a quicker process because our former office director, Sister Kathy White, was on her way out and I was on my way in, and Bishop Barnes wanted the process to be thorough, but also didn't have enough time to prepare in a year. So he gave us 6 months, and in those 6 months, the process begins with item number 1. The peer review team is selected by the office and approved by the bishop. So the bishop sees the name, sees the backgrounds, the bios, qualifications, and he approves the team selected by our office. And it is recommended that the team represents, as I mentioned earlier, local, state, and national input. That's very important to have, these 3 different perspectives. Mm-hmm. Item number 2, the second part of the process, is that the office makes a list of individuals that will be interviewed by the peer review team. So if you recall, I know we had 6-member team, and we had about 35 interviewees, and so we broke them down into 3 groups. There
were some long days you had us do, but it was all very worth it.
Yes.
And that's how you get the best picture of what's going on in the diocese.
Exactly. So we select a list of interviewees, trying to avoid as much as possible conflict of interest, right? Because that'll just be probably set up for failure if you're just picking your own people and trying to make yourself look good, But that might be something that people might be tempted to do. But in our case, and especially with Sister Kathy's intention, the former office director, we really wanted to hear how we were doing, and from the people that had the experience of relationship-wise with our office, working with our office in many ways, from priests to religious, to lady employees from parishes, from schools, to office directors, to our vicar for priests, and a variety of roles in the diocese, which helps with the input and helps the team get an idea of what's going on in regards to working with other offices and parishes and schools. And the third part of the process is that the office prepares a document, a binder, which makes it just simpler, with its history, the staff, the roles, positions, its purpose, its mission, its goals, policies, materials, brochures, the booklets, our safe environment policy, and every material, every document we have goes into that binder or went into that binder. Also, our accomplishments, it's part of the audit. We were maybe last year's audit, Stonebridge audit, that went in there. Challenges, needs, statistics, and studies. So anything, demographic statistics, local, governmental studies, church studies, diocesan studies. So you just get this binder and you just put everything, all your documentation there. And you remember, every one of you, each team member gets a binder, and you have time. You have about 3-4 months to look at that, go over, review that binder, and get an idea of the ministry, of the office. So that's a task in itself, because you have to read through all of this, right?
With some homework.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, Eileen, you had done a lot of different reviews and audits in your work history as well. So what did you think about how the process itself worked as far as someone preparing to go in and do the peer review?
I have to say that we have to start with applauding your bishop. Loud and clear that he was willing and wanted to do this. I think he set the tone. And the tone in creating this peer review process was to, and I wrote it down, reflect on core values. That's why we're doing this.
Absolutely.
And it was very clear when we got to the diocese that this had been a discussion and people were on board with this. To celebrate, there was a celebration of this launch of the peer group, peer review. From the minute you got to the front door, all the way up to the Office for the Protection of Children and Young People. Then into the schools, into the parishes, into the programs. A real celebration. The diocese created that. To get everyone on board and to have this supported by the senior staff of the diocese is a major step forward. I would suggest that this is a model for all bishops. It's a professional model that's been out there for a long time. People have been using the concept of peer review for a long time.
Absolutely. It definitely was just a good way to have the diocese, like you said, focus on their core values. And I know within child and youth protection, we are so often focused on the national level of helping other folks at the diocesan level to push forward on making child protection a core value and survivor assistance a core value. So this just ties right back into that.
Exactly.
The fact that Bishop Barnes suggested that this be done says to me that he is a leader, a shepherd, who does not want to languish in being adequate. He's not languishing in adequacy. The word that comes to mind is excellence. And we share this in this business of child and youth protection for our church. We share this goal.
Absolutely. The former chair of the Bishops' Committee on Child and Youth Protection, Bishop Burns, he said when he was chair that in child protection, we can't just be coasting, because if we're coasting, that means we're going downhill. We have to constantly be, like you said, Eileen, improving what we're doing, and that's exactly what this process, I think, is doing.
Yeah.
Yes. And in part, I think, with also the temptation of just falling into complacency, right?
Absolutely.
This really awakens your ministry if it is falling into some sort of complacency where you think everything's going fine. It's, it's everything's flowing how it should be flowing. But sometimes when you get input from the outside, from a peer review, you find out that there are some things that need to be changed, improved. You'll find some strengths and that you have some strengths as an office, as a staff, collaborating, in your core values. Our diocesan core values are hospitality, collaboration, faith sharing, and reconciliation. Right? So as an office staff, maybe as a ministry or an office working with other entities, you'll find out if it's really working for you, right? And for others, because we're at the service of others. So yeah. So the fourth item on the process of the peer review is that the on-site review process usually takes 3 days. That's something to know. It might take more, it might take less, right? I don't think less would work, but it could take more. In our case, it was 3 days, and during these 3 days, the peer review team will follow up the bullets here. Initially, the first thing that the team does, it initially meets with the bishop for instructions, right? As Eileen was saying, excuse me. The bishop will talk with the team, and he'll directly, objectively tell them what they're there for. Right. In this case, it was he wanted to make sure that our office was following and living up to the diocesan core values in overseeing our diocesan commitment in protecting children in our parishes and in schools. So then after the team meets with the bishop, then the team meets and interviews the office ministry staff. Now we were interviewed, our office staff was interviewed by your team. Had great questions. I remember the questions you had for me, and we all remember the questions you had for all of us, because then we all kind of shared what they ask you. So that's very important, because that's where you get the input from the office team or staff itself, right? Another thing that the peer review team does, it interviews individuals affiliated with the Office for Ministry, and this is when we're talking about earlier, these 35 people that you got to interview to get insight and ask questions in regards to the relationship with the Office of Child and Youth Protection in the Diocese of San Bernardino. And then if necessary, and or possible, and in our case with the team you were a part of, it was possible, visit different online and physical sites related to the office ministry, right? So I believe you got to visit a couple of parishes and a couple of schools and ask questions, ask the pastor, the principal, school principal, maybe the staff, So that's very important too for the peer review team, to be able to connect not only with the bishop and not only with the office staff, but also with everyone out there, everyone who we serve and we work with and collaborate with. And then the team also meets as a team throughout these 3 days to talk about and review findings on the ongoing process, right? So I remember I wasn't in that room when the team was there, when you were there talking about the findings, right? But throughout these 3 days, at the end of the day, I believe, or maybe in the middle of the day, you had time to talk amongst yourselves and just share about the experience and the findings that you were discovering, right? Then the team also concludes the review by meeting with the bishop for closing remarks. So at the end of the review, I don't recall if you met with Bishop Barnes at the end. You did, yes. And just for closing remarks on his behalf and for closing remarks on your behalf. And then the final part of this process is that the team, or one team member on behalf of the whole team writes a report, is assigned to write the final report, the final findings, with the findings, and send that report to Bishop. In this case, Bishop Barnes got that letter from the team, and he was very happy with that report. Any input on elaborating that report?
So the report itself, then, it was transparent in the sense that it wasn't only Bishop who got it. Everybody from your office got it, Bishop got it. Was there other leaders within the diocese that received it as well?
Our chancellor, our diocesan chancellor, yes.
So basically everybody involved specifically with the Office of Child Protection.
Yes. The question on the PowerPoint says, what happens after the bishop receives the ministry peer review findings? Now, Bishop Barnes received this report. Number one on the item list is the office ministry will meet with the bishop to review the findings. And we did sit with Bishop Barnes for about a couple of hours and just went over the whole report, right? He had questions. What do you think about this? Why is this way? What do you think about that? So it gets pretty intense because it's transparent. It's I guess I'll say it's the truth based on the perspective and findings of this peer review team that was assembled to do that, to identify challenges and strengths, right, and assess the bishop with what could be done better and what's being done good, and so it is very helpful sitting with your bishop as in, and not an office director, it's the whole office staff, because it's not an individual review, it's an office ministry review. The second point of item on the list is the office will write an action plan with timelines and assign responsibilities for each action item addressed in the report. So went back to the drawing board, went back to our office, and as an office staff created this action plan, with responsibilities in this case, on training, on communications with in our case, with Virtus, in regards to our safe environment training for adults and for minors, our retreat program, in this case, our Restoring Me retreat program for survivors of abuse, in that case, what's working for the program and what is not working. And just created this action plan, trying to respond to the challenges and needs presented in the report and shared with Bishop Barnes. Then the office action plan will be sent to the bishop for review and approval. So we created the action plan, sent it to the bishop, and the fourth item is that the office meets with the bishop to discuss the implementation of the action plan. So that's how it works.
How long of a process was it to get to the creating the action plan? So when you got, because it was a lot of information that was put into that report, and then as far as kind of going through all that, deciphering it as an office, how involved was that whole process?
Well, you have to look at the report, and I remember I have the report right here. It's unread. It's red cover.
Draw some attention.
Just because you want to make sure that that's the report. That's what you have to work on. So taking into consideration that the ministry peer review is to focus on the office's functions in relation to, are they adapting the diocesan core values? You're protecting kids, you're training thousands of people, you're background checking individuals, you're living up to, the charter, the national charter. Mm-hmm. But are you living up to the core values in the process? Because the diocesan core values are placed within the process of ministry, correct? Are we hospitable? Are we collaborating? Are we reconciling with, in any matter with whatever challenges we've had as a staff or as within diocesan offices or with parishes or individuals outside of our office? Are we faith sharing? Are we praying before we do a training? Are we praying as employees? Are we praying as an office staff? Do we have is faith part of our ministry, not only safe environment, which can sometimes stay behind? So taking into consideration what our Bishop Barnes called this peer review for, then we say, okay, these are the core values and these are the findings. In this case, and I have a list right here. One of the findings was the geography, the distance. Our diocese is, I believe it's the second largest geographically speaking a diocese in the U.S. So we border with the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, with the Diocese of Orange, and the Diocese of San Diego, and it stretches all the way to counties, San Bernardino County and Riverside County, all the way to Arizona. It borders with Arizona through Needles and Blythe. That's a huge, rural and urban area, and it's 1.8 million Catholics. So that's one challenge that was addressed, or one finding that was addressed in the report. And it was suggested that, and then we took each suggestion, some of the findings and some of the challenges had suggestions, not all of them, which is it's fine because we don't have all the answers yet. So the suggestion for that is to create a newsletter, not only on-site video streaming type of meetings, but also a newsletter that can communicate to every parish and entity, our information from the office, national information, local diocesan information, ministry information. A second finding was that we were understaffed, right? We had a staff of 4 people: a director, associate director, secretary, and database coordinator. But with the retreat program being such a big part of this office, and so busy with such demand, we were just, the associate director position was overseeing the retreat program, and it was pretty overwhelming at some times. And I can say that because I was the associate director and coordinating the retreats. So the recommendation was for our office to have add 1 more staff member, and which after this ministry peer review, and after sitting with Bishop Barnes, thank God and thank Bishop, did. So now we have a new staff member in our office.
Wow.
So this peer review really helped Bishop understand the importance of the office having 1 more additional member to help us with all the work, with all the tasks.
So I want to highlight that, because I know a lot of folks watching in most dioceses, there's limited resources.
Yes.
And sometimes safe environment survivor assistance doesn't always get perhaps as much as it could within a diocese. So I know we can't obviously guarantee that that's what's going to happen in every diocese if you're able to take on a peer review process, but at least in this case, I like how you phrased it, it helped the bishop understand the realities of what happens in safe environment, right? Because so often, they have so much going on, they can't look at the day-to-day of in the office. But when they're seeing it all on paper, it's, okay, wow, I've got this many people doing this much work. So that's, I think, a key element of something that came out of this.
And in the way it was presented, right? It's a peer review report.
Yeah.
It's not a report or an asking from a suggestion from the office director or from the department administrator or from the chancellor. This is an outside peer review team that comes in and suggests this. That's what it's for. Great finding.
I want to talk a little bit about that. Peer review is meant to focus on strengths. And one has to be very careful as a reviewer not to be critical. That's not the purpose of peer review. We are peers. My experience may be somewhat different from yours. So we can learn from one another. I particularly felt this going to the parishes and going to the schools. There's the main office that has it all together, and then you go out into the vineyard to see what exactly is happening. Indeed, this is a diocese that has done very, very good work. I particularly liked and would suggest that when peer review people go out into the field, that their position should be to be available for questions. Let me give you an example. In the school that we visited, one of the schools, the principals in schools today are struggling with how to keep a safe environment without making it look like a militaristic camp. The principals today are struggling, let's say, with staff compliance, because maybe not all the staff feel that reading every bulletin that is sent to them from Virtus is all that important. They appreciate it, but they're on to other things. So the principal said to me, "How did you handle this?" I said, "We had the same problems, the very same problems." One recommendation that I made to the principals at the end of the year to ask all of your teachers and principals to collect the training record from their teachers. Well, you know what that means. If I haven't read all the bulletins and I'm teaching English to the 3rd grade, I'm going to read all the bulletins. And then you will be able to have a folder that says, look at our continuing education program in this area. So I like the idea of being a peer and being able to help staff with problems that we've all had.
Yes, and one of the challenges that was part of the items in the report is the lack of cooperation from parishes, right? And so not that many schools, but more than anything, parishes. The lack of collaboration, right? And you know, it's hard sometimes to get a parish to collaborate and participate, because it's sometimes, for some reason, safe environment isn't, you know, at the top of the priority list line, right? There's other things to do. And sometimes it's because of short staff. Sometimes the person overseeing the safe environment in the parish is a part-time person, a volunteer, not a full-time employee. Sometimes they are a full-time employee, but if they have 6 or 7 hours on the day, they can't dedicate 2 or 3 hours to safe environment because they have a list of other things to do, right? So that's something we probably find all over the country, all over the dioceses. But that part of the lack of collaboration and cooperation from parishes was something that was found in the report. And so in regards to how did we go about in creating this action plan, which is identifying the findings on the report and then trying to figure out how to work out, including the recommendations from the team, how can we work together to fix this or make this better, right? Cultural diversity is a big thing. You know, the Diocese of San Bernardino is in Southern California. Yeah. We have, you know, an array of just different cultures, and so it's not only the cultural mentality that has to adapt to the safe environment world in the Catholic Church nowadays, but also language and idioms are also things that might get misunderstood or create challenges. So that's another thing that was highlighted in the report. And the background checks, our background check process, it's a bit different than I think most or many dioceses. In regards to that, our background check process is overseen by the Office of Human Resources, not the Office of Child and Youth Protection. So that communicating information can sometimes be challenging. It's not that challenging for us, but it was highlighted that we should look into that. So what we do to come up with our action plan, you know, to answer your question, Melanie, we look at all the findings and we look at the recommendations. We're happy to see the strengths, but we're also happy to see the challenges, because then we have items on a list that we can work towards making better. And then we just designate, I guess, we designated, you know, responsibilities in regards to who's in response to this, and who in our office can do this better, or is it just up to our office? Is it a collaboration thing? You know, we have to collaborate more with this office, with, you know, Human Resources. Do we have to collaborate more with Office of Young Catholics? Do we have to collaborate more with the Office of Catechetical Ministry? Should we collaborate more with the Office of Priest Personnel? I mean, and so it is a collaborative process too. That's how we address the action plan. We look at the findings, we look at the recommendations, and, you know, we draw up the plan. So, and it works out.
Absolutely. So we have had a couple of questions come in, so we can kind of go through some of those too, and just for a little bit. And just as a reminder, if you have a question and you haven't asked it, feel free to write that in the chat box too, and we'll get to those in just a minute. So the first one is, did the peer review process improve the team relationship within your office, or did it present a challenge to that?
It actually united us as an office staff, because we have to really work together, right? It's not only, okay, who is going to put the binder together? You know, we all have a piece to the puzzle. So that working together, we already work together as an office staff, but working together and collaborating in this process obviously brings out the best in us in regards to, we really want to shine but even though there's a reality that might not make us shine as bright as we'd like to, once the report is out, but it really united us. It did work. We are closer now because of the process, and because it doesn't end with the report, because that's only the beginning. Continuing with the action plan is what makes us work together.
Absolutely. And Eileen, I don't know if you kind of had that same mindset as well as we were interviewing everybody in the office, but it definitely seemed like from the beginning they worked well together. But through the process, I know a couple of other pieces came out that seemed to really bring you guys together more and add to that camaraderie, which I think was helpful.
Everyone seemed to not be prepared for this in a casual way. Mm-hmm. In other words, they knew company was coming, and what was important is that they wanted to support the effort of the diocese and the bishop and your office. Core values. That doesn't mean that everyone works in the office and gets along just so wonderfully, but that wasn't part of what we were there to look at.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and what it actually, how it really united us as an office is that since this ministry peer review process was focused on per bishop's request on our diocesan core values, then we as an office were embedded more into understanding, at the core these values, right? Really, implementing them amongst ourselves and amongst others. Mm-hmm. So we really, we really got into the core values.
Yes.
Yes. So much so that after the process, the review on our beginning of the year retreat, that was the theme of our retreat. Our diocesan work for core values. Oh, so we had a whole day, to hear someone else talk about the core values our diocese has. So that it did bring us together. It was a blessing. Yeah, and it was a blessing to me individually because I was the associate director, and Sister Kathy White was leaving, and I did not know if I was going to be the director. It wasn't a promotion. I was actually interviewed and hired, but I had that opportunity to go through this process, mm-hmm. and the report gave me the mm-hmm. Gave me the information I mm-hmm. needed to actually enhance the action plan. Yes. Mm-hmm. And actually also to I guess plan on how to work with my staff in a way that we can address the items in the report and in the findings. So it did bring us more together. It is a blessing. It was a blessing, and it's still a blessing because we're still in the process. We're still responding to the action plan. We're implementing the action plan. So.
Well, I would imagine part of the idea of the action plan too is that maybe you have kind of your things that you can implement short term, but then I would imagine you have to have some of the long term pieces in mind as well, because this is not we checked off the box by Tuesday and we're done.
No, we're done, Bishop.
Yeah.
It's been 3 months. Oh no, it's not only part of what I learned from this ministry peer review, the findings, what the report states, each of the items. It's not only a physical or it's not a professional, maybe shift on, mm-hmm. on certain areas that the office has to mm-hmm. apply. Mm-hmm. It's in the attitude of the office, because what the report reflects, it's just the attitude, the character, and the interest of the office. Again, not the personnel individually, but just mm-hmm. the office itself. Absolutely. Right. So this report helps us shift, if we have to shift, change something to have another perspective to respond to a challenge.
If I could just add, we were talking about the office excelling. The idea of excellence, your office should be a model for this peer review process. The purpose of peer review, the goal is to excel, for excellence, to highlight it is good, which you did, to recognize and anchor what was presented by the peer review people, to recreate it afterwards and to extend it into the vineyard, into your parishes and your schools and your programs. Refine it. That's what a peer review is. It's not an audit. It's not coming in looking for weaknesses. It's looking for excellence. Mm-hmm. What we need to do is let the people in the pew know about this. The good work that is being done, not only in San Bernardino, but in dioceses across the country.
Mm-hmm. And this was last year for our office in our diocese. So it had been 16 years since the charter began. Mm-hmm. So this is Bishop Barnes saying, okay, it's been 16 years. Where are you as an office? Where are we as an office and as a diocese in regards to what your office is providing for our diocese, which is, you know, the overseeing of our safe environment policy. Yeah. And it's time to step back, you know, just when you're painting, if you like art and you're painting, you step back and you have to look where you're going, if you're using too much light or too much darkness or too much of one color. Mm-hmm. So this is what this peer review is. Yes,
well, this is what makes you good at what you do, because it's called performance improvement.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. And it's a never-ending process.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And you mentioned the Diocese of San Bernardino being basically a model for this process. And in a sense, I think you have definitely been helping us out to do that, because you've not only been doing this webinar to share what the diocese did, but anybody can also access the documents that you guys have used. So nobody has to start from scratch, which leads me into the next question is, if a diocese is interested in doing this peer review process, they want to strive for excellence, as you said, Eileen, how would you recommend they bring it up to their bishop if the bishop is not the one that's requesting this?
That's a good question, because in our case, it's the bishop who always requests the peer review. I think maybe for starters, probably showing the bishop this webinar, you know, sending him the link and saying, Bishop, you know, dear Bishop, please take a look at this this webinar. It's an interesting perspective of in a form of evaluating for excellence and consistency also. Not only the Safe Environment Office, but any office. In our case, you know, in our diocese, this is something that every office, in one point of another of its existence, goes through. I guess it's evaluating the stages, you know, the changes and shifts and stages of the office. I would recommend first for anyone interested in their bishop, of taking a look at this, of showing them this webinar, showing them the documents, showing the bishop the documents presented on the link, and more than anything, probably giving Bishop Barnes, you know, a call or emailing him to get some more input from him, who is pretty much the person who started this, or the bishop who started this in our diocese.
Now, I know there's sometimes a concern with limited financial resources as well, because I think you mentioned too that the diocese there were resources devoted to this, the topic of peer review, but I know some dioceses may have limited resources where maybe they can't allocate or they have to kind of work toward it. Are there changes that you might suggest for a diocese that maybe doesn't have specific resources they can dedicate to a peer review?
Well, in our case, the bishop gives the office a certain budget, and you know, this is how much you have to spend, and if you go over it, then it's the office who's going to cover, you know, any you know, overspending. It's not overspending, that's lack of a better term, because you're not really overspending. But there is a certain budget given to the office in our case. We stayed. Sister Kathy was great. She's a sister of Providence, so you know, we stayed under the budget. Most of the spending, I believe, it's more on just getting the team there, right? And you know, that's just, you know, the hospitality, you know, the flights, you know, the trips, covering the cost of the trips and everything. There is in our case a stipend, right, an honorary for the team, for each team member. So that's another thing. I know some of the team members, you know, said this is part of my job, so that was a relief. That's probably why we were under the budget. That's a challenging thing. I I'd probably think of grants, right? Looking into grants, sponsors, sponsoring something like that, to help with the costs. It's I don't think it's not that a big of a cost because everything is in the office. We have, it's only a matter of putting your binder together, getting all your information to present to the team, and I think the biggest cost is just getting the team to your diocese and just for 3 or 5 days, and
you might also look to your own diocese for experts. You did that. Father
Yes.
Tim,
That's true.
yes,
he was wonderful. He was extremely knowledgeable and helpful. So I would suggest looking a little closer
Yes.
in order to put together a peer review.
yes. It is suggested that we have the local, state, and national. In this case, we were able to do that. That's obviously sometimes a larger cost. But yes, we did have Father Tim. We did have Tony Muga, he works for the Child Protection Services for San Bernardino County. So we were able to get locals and help with expertise on the issue. But it just depends. It depends. This is not the objective is one, but it's not a cookie cut thing.
Yeah.
In regards to the process.
It's always good to have a member from the National Review Board there,
It is.
because
It would be,
our
yes.
task is to make recommendations to the bishops.
To the ordinaries.
And
yes.
I know that Melanie and I are going to try very hard to make sure this is on the agenda for our bishops to consider as a practice.
And as the NRB's National Review Board makes recommendations through the Bishops' Committee, I think we can definitely discuss
Yes.
a lot of these key aspects as well. And tying back into the important thing is trying to have a peer review, whether or not you're able to have national folks or not. If you can't bring in someone from the National Review Board, well, how about your own diocesan review
Correct.
board?
Exactly.
As understanding, but also
Correct.
being kind of an outsider when it comes to the day-to-day operations of the office.
Exactly.
Or a neighboring diocese that can have somebody
Yes.
drive.
Yes.
Yes. And I do think I believe the team interviewed a couple of our review board,
Oh,
diocesan
absolutely.
review board
I
members.
did, and
which-
they were enthusiastic about what they do, because this peer review was launched with enthusiasm. It was fascinating. They're the review board members take their task very seriously, particularly at this time. You can imagine the burden on them.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, what I personally got out of this peer review is that through the report, the findings, you get an idea not only of the challenges that we have to work on in regards to administrative, professional, but the pastoral ones too, because we can be doing an excellent administrative job and professionally made with the qualified people, but sometimes pastorally we might not be there, and that's just giving off a wrong representation of not only the Office of Child and Youth Protection, but also the diocese itself. So that's what I got out of this peer review. It's the perspective of administrative, professional, and pastoral, which is at the core of our diocesan core values and vision. So.
Now, this particular one that was done in San Bernardino was focused on the Safe Environment Office of Child and Youth Protection piece. But as we've been discussing this, I mean, those folks that are in charge of the survivor assistance programs, or even I think review boards, I mean, you can apply this to any office.
Exactly.
Within the
Yes, you
Yes.
can. You can.
Yes.
Yes. The process is designed to review any office, any ministry. So.
And that's all of the questions that we've had come in. So I'd like to just ask then if you have any final thoughts overall on the peer review process before we close.
Let's keep up the good work.
Great.
Yeah. And let's keep our priests, our bishops, and all of us who are working together to protect our children and youth and vulnerable adults in prayer, and also all victims of abuse in prayer.
Wonderful. Well, with that, thank you both for attending, and let's end with a quick prayer. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Well, thank you so much for coming in here and presenting and helping us learn a little bit more about peer reviews. Thank you, those of you that are tuning in with us. Again, this will be recorded, or it is recorded. It will be sent out once we have it available on our website. So thank you for joining us, and please tune in to our future webinars that we have coming up. Until next time.